Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
He took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States of America. By some, he's been called controversial.
I'll keep my freedom. I'll keep my guns. Try to keep my money and my religion too. Now, keep in mind that some of my guests have been approached by Homeland Security or FBI saying, why are you going on the Clay Douglas show?
My message to those guys, if they're listening this morning, is go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you'll learn something.
We both took the same oath, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I don't recall there being an expiration date on that. Keep my big DA, keep my friends the same. Keep the government out of my business and y'all can keep the change.
He is the free American, Clay Douglas.
We know what we need. We know who to blame.
Catch the Free American Hour, weekdays at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern.
I'll keep the USA and y'all can keep the change.
For the podcast and more details, visit www.freeamerican.com or catch the podcast by phone by calling 832-999-8621.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. My guest today is Christopher Strunk from the Association for Sovereign Home Rule within. And let me just give you a little introduction from his website. We're going to be talking about a number of things in a number of directions. Who's pulling the strings behind the whole New World Order things. But I found this quote on your website, Chris. The American dream is what you are allowed to have when you're asleep. Listen to what George Carlin had to say before he died about corporate control over your life. You may notice that the Knight of Malta, Louis Lehrman's connection to Ron Paul. Lehrman was the former owner of Rite Aid. He was a Jew that became a Roman Catholic and then was brought into the Knights of Malta. This is the same story of the Jewish Knights of Malta, such as Abraham Foxman, the head of the RCC Pope's ADL, created to incite anti-Jewish fury, not prevent it. You say Paul is in bed with the Knights of Malta to draw off the vote from his brother Knights Santorum and Gingrich as to assure a victory for Barack Obama, as he too is being ruled by the Knights of Malta. Secretary of War Defense Leon Panetta is a Knight of Malta, as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Martin Dempsey. The Jesuits, with their knights, control both sides of the American empire's political dialectic, so that the calculated synthesis may be under their control. Ron Paul is part of that control. He denies that 9/11 was an inside job, praises the Pope of Rome, and has lived in Rome. Jewish papal slave Bill Mayer backs the orders. Ron Paul, Roman Catholic. George Carlin gave one of his last speeches when he rightly described the control behind the American government banks. The problem with Carlin was his Roman Catholicism and his refusal to finger Rome as the real power behind it all. But you might ignore his profanity, and the substance of that speech is totally correct. Maybe I'll play that for him later, because we have it here. We have it up on your website, and it's all linked. How are you doing, Chris? What's happening? I think it's been about 2 months since you've been on my show. And that was a mouthful, but that was your mouthful. Tell us what's happened to you. My experience is when you start trying to come out talk about the truth, when you talk about Christianity and the control behind it, you get targeted as quickly as talking about the Jewish control, which is got to be, I would say, somehow hand in hand. Can you educate us a little bit?
it's been hand in hand ever since the Romans wanted to control the land bridge between Africa and the rest of the world. And certainly Samaria and Judea were the targets of Rome. And the Hebrews were definitely a existential threat to the Roman hierarchy, in that they had a path to a path to freedom, a path out of slavery, and were instrumental in pushing monotheism against the interest of Rome, which is to this day still supporting Pontifex Maximus, who hasn't changed the tune since the time of the Second Temple. But yeah, so the battle between the Hebrews and the Romans is well documented, and it's unfortunately not taught in schools nowadays. And when I saw that piece by George Carlin, who I enjoyed, I call him a recovering Catholic, because he really is, he really was educated in the Catholic form of self-reflection or self-flagellation, and that I thought it was an expression which needed to be told. Listen, I've been in court for the last 4 years, on the people behind Obama, and I figured early on out that Obama was there as a mouthpiece for some group, and I finally figured it out in the beginning of 2009 that it was the group around Zbigniew Brzezinski, who is Georgetown. He's out of the Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington, in the building owned by the Jesuits, and that his son Ian was John McCain's foreign policy advisor. Ian is the head of the Atlantic Council, which is essentially the head of NATO, and his office is only a few blocks down from his father's office at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And down the other end of the street is Mark Brzezinski, who was Obama's foreign policy advisor. So that Brzezinski had control of both McCain and Obama in the entire debate, and that they were two hands shaking in order to put Obama into office. And when you look at who Obama is, I see him first as Bush 4, but I see him as an expansion of the New World Order through the promotion of the Fourth Reich, which I consider the European Union, where Obama transferred close to $16 trillion into financial aid to Europeans, and went into partnership in order to control the flow of drugs out of Afghanistan, which had been Brzezinski's bailiwick ever since the 60s, starting with the Vietnam War. But that as soon as Kennedy had been assassinated, he came in and was an advisor to Johnson. And both he and Kissinger were trained by Fritz Kramer out of Harvard, who was connected into the Harem and Kennan crowd, who created the Soviet containment policy as a part of the Cold War. But in any case, Brzezinski's deal, I call him the Opium King. Brzezinski's deal is control of the world's opium trade, and because it represents 95% of all opium grown of pharmaceutical grade quality, and that the entire pharmaceutical industry is very dependent upon the opium coming out of Afghanistan. So that Brzezinski in 78 under Carter, 79, did not want the Soviets to control the world's opium subbase for pharmaceuticals, and created the basis for the 10-year war and the 10-year hooking of Soviets and Russians on opium, in just the same way as we saw our troops hooked on opium or heroin when they came out of Vietnam. But that so Brzezinski is really the glue that puts together this whole picture for me back in the beginning of 2009, and I sued Brzezinski in state court. He freaked out, and his attorneys spent about $80,000 defeating me, or at least pick up the telephone and telling the state judge to make me go away. And so I had 32 defendants, including McCain and Obama, in the case I filed in the beginning of 2011. It went on for, over a year, and the judge sat on it, and he ended up sanctioning me for having the temerity to call Obama not a natural-born citizen because his father was a British subject. So that's still going on in an appeal in state appellate court. But that's certainly I'm situated in the first Jesuit provincial state, which is New York, and that certainly the New York province was part of the case because they were controlling the campaign finance matching funds out of New York City for New York City candidates, where they would give $6 for every $1 of campaign funds raised. So I took Father Parks and Father O'Hare to court. Of course, they were partners with Sotomayor, who ended up on the Supreme Court right out of this campaign finance board, and of course she went through the Second Circuit. But so I'm very busy in the court system, and they're beating up on me, and I'm beating up on them, and I can't think of a better way to pass my time. I have been attempting to get the list of all of the agricultural subsidized farms in New York State, and I've been unable to do that. I see that as a linchpin in preventing the ability of local municipalities and their towns and villages in becoming self-sufficient, because the local farmers, when they're on the dole, are told not to plant, and therefore are unproductive on a local scale to build a local economy. So we've got about 1,650 something local towns and villages, and I'm trying to organize mayors and supervisors and executives to develop local economies, and to no avail. I mean, certainly the federal money has poisoned the well here in New York State.
Now, just let me touch on that for a second. Interrupt you for just a second here, because Obama passed an executive order. He's been good about that. Been passing more than just about anybody before him. But he passed one talking about rural communities and the value of rural communities, and that's why the federal government had to get involved in the rural communities. So,
well, it just reversed everything he's saying, and you come to the truth. The more the federal government gets involved, the more it picks winners and losers, and that personally, I believe that energy, food, and defensible space is the way to go on all local sovereign issues, and that you've got to grow your own energy, grow your own food, and maintain your own militia, or else you're going to lose all these first two. So that under Agenda 21, or the Rio Treaty of 91 and 92, signed by H.W. Bush and not ratified by the Senate, the subsidies by the federal government are to essentially leverage control away from local control into the new members of the Federal Reserve, the Red Chinese banking system, who had bought and been marketed large numbers of derivatives of mortgages, etc. My latest task is to take on the MERS system, the mortgage entry reporting system, and to take on the Red Chinese directly, which is what I'm doing. I intervened in the Dragon family versus a series of Italian lucky mucks, including the World Forum. And I was in that case starting in January, there was $1 trillion in bonds stolen crossing into the Swiss border, crossing the Swiss border in order to set up a two-sided platform in Switzerland with the Red Chinese who want to play both sides of the game. And that case is being refiled. But I tell you, Clay, I figure I only have so much time on Earth, and I might as well create as much problem as possible. Certainly the Red Chinese don't like me too much, and the Brzezinskis don't like me too much. That's for damn sure. And whenever Obama opens his mouth, you know he's telling a lie, and he can take that to the bank.
Well, now let me just interrupt you on Obama here for just a minute, because I think he's perfect. I think they have really done a superb job of grooming and picking the next New World Order leader. I mean, let's see, he's part black, he's part white, he's part Jewish, he's part Muslim, he's part Christian. You know, he's like the perfect brown leader for this new generation, and he's aligning himself with everybody against white Christians, aren't they? I mean,
well,
it seems to me that this is
Babylon.
Go ahead.
He's Babylon revisited. He's the mystery religion. You know, we know less about him than any other person that's ever been in office, and certainly he is a mystery. I call him Mystery Babylon. I know that Bill Cooper got into the Mystery Babylon stuff in the '90s. I remember that very well.
It happens to be the name of my book with all the Homeland
Security.
Really? Yes, sir. Mystery Babylon: The New World Order Unveiled. I've got the whole history of Operation Watchtower, which was the CIA Mossad drug smuggling operation. I've got the whole Homeland Security assessment after FEMA rolled into. FEMA was rolled into Homeland Security. I mean, we'd been talking about what FEMA was going to become by executive order for a long time, and suddenly, I've got a whole film out on that. So yes.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that. Now you got really piqued my interest here, Clay, because I had been listening and reading what Bill Cooper's been saying since the early '90s, and certainly I was aware of the role of Clinton and the New World Order in doing the Oklahoma
Clinton covered up for I mean, I met all of these people. I mean, I met Terry Reid, who flew with Barry Seal. Barry Seal dropped me off some of the best Oaxacan pot I ever smoked when I was in Dallas. But then he ran up to, Bill, and I blew the whistle on George Bush as CIA director, running the special forces down in Colombia to build the radio guide towers to bring over 100 plane loads of cocaine into Albrook Air Force Base. I got that information firsthand from the guy that was in the operation with Colonel Edward P. Cotolo, who sent that document to National NSA.
Well, I was stationed at Albrook in the mid '60s in the Air Force, so I'm familiar with.
When it was happening, Albrook Air Force Base closed down now, but yes, sir. And William Tyree, who's doing life, they murdered his wife, framed him for the murder, and put him in Walpole prison for life. He'd been on my shows half a dozen times before they tried to kill me.
Wow.
And they blew Bill Cooper and I were talking. We'd been meeting, and we were talking over my new tapped cell phone, the one I've had for years and years and years. And we were going to put our magazines together. I was doing the Free American. He was doing Veritas. We were both on shortwave. We were both on WWCR. Both of us recognized Alex Jones for being basically a Mossad asset.
A pile of poop.
Yeah, well, Alex, I had him on speaking at one of my shows. I was doing preparedness type expos in Texas, and I had him speaking on one of my shows. And at dinner that evening, I said, Alex, did it ever occur to you that your wife might be your handler? and he's never spoken to me since.
Wow. And who was his wife?
Some pretty Jewish lady that operates all of his websites.
Okay.
And so his children are dual citizens. His children, and he doesn't talk about the Jews. He doesn't talk about the, it's like, why are we so soaked in dogma that we can't talk about anybody else? Why are Christians so susceptible to the idea that all Muslims are bad? All Jews are good, they're the chosen race. Come on, this is all propaganda we're being fed. They don't
certainly all religion is a way of controlling people's direction in life, and that's it's a control mechanism. So I didn't know that about your that you had been so active with Bill Cooper.
Yeah, 2 weeks after we decided to put it together, they shot him.
Oh boy. Well, I would not have gone out into that yard in the middle of the night after I'd heard gunshots. That's for sure. I don't know if that's the true story, but we're talking 2000, November or October 2001.
That's not the way I heard it. The way I heard it, the police were posing and pretending to be drunk teenagers. And Bill certainly, he lived up there on the top of that mountain, with his dog, so he certainly would have gone out to run anybody off that was trespassing on his land, and he would have always had a sidearm. And they shot him because if they'd let him get back in the house, they would have all died. And they knew that because Bill made it real apparent. You come after me, I'm going to shoot back. I'm going to fight back. He made it real apparent.
Yeah. Right, that was clear. Well, I didn't know that specific detail, but certainly I had a great deal of respect for Bill, and I'm not one to hold back on investigating the role of the use of religion to control people's minds. I don't think.
Careful now! Don't give away the plot of my next series of novels.
I didn't realize you had a book out, and I'm going to have to get that book from you.
But if you go to your Skype account, the book will be waiting for you there after the show.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you, because it fits into what I'm doing with Brzezinski. Brzezinski is an especially evil person. His family goes all the way back to Lithuania. His multiple great-grandfather was the founder of the Polish army and was a very high-level Vatican Knight in the First Reich. And the First Reich running from about 962 to 1804, 1806, and the Second Reich being from 1806 to 1917, and then the Third Reich, which you well know, and the Fourth Reich was created through efforts from 1945 to the present. The Fourth Reich being the European Union and the formation of the Mediterranean Union under King Juan Carlos, who is sort of at the top of the monarchical structure in the world, and that as being both the king of Spain and the king of Jerusalem, he would on the throne in Jerusalem were the Mediterranean Union be finalized. Brzezinski and Ian Brzezinski and Mark Brzezinski and McCain and Obama had been used to overthrow any national sovereignty that remained in the Mediterranean. Right now they're using the Atlantic Council. Ian Brzezinski is using Article 5 of the NATO Charter to supposedly support Turkey to invade Syria. Of course, I'm adamantly against that, and that. But the fact that Assad is a national figure, he has to be put down just the way that Gaddafi was put down and Mubarak was put down, and in order to have a caliphate under a restructured Ottoman structure, which is the deal that is with King Juan Carlos and Obama. Obama's got people inside the White House or right out of the Gulen movement. And Fethullah Gulen lives in, he's a Muslim brother who lives in Pennsylvania, and whose movement was instrumental in putting Obama into office with a Jesuit priest by the name of Michel. And that, just like Obama's mentor is Gregory Galuzzo, a Jesuit priest who ran the Gamel organization that was funded by the Ford Foundation. So that the Mediterranean Union and the European Union are there to create this huge caliphate, or the reemergence of Babylon, with the construction of the Third Temple, in which the deal was, when they burned the Second Temple in 70 AD, was to say to the Pharisees, look, you all can't come together under one common ecumenical agreement that everybody will be under the authority of Rome. Therefore, we're going to burn your temple, we're going to steal the money, we're going to build the Colosseum, and as a public spectacle, we're going to slaughter any Jew or Baptist who would stand in the way of the power of the ecumenical structure of Rome under a Pontifex Maximus. And that was in 70, well, first in the attempted overthrow of Nero in 64 AD by the Caligula family, the Piso family, essentially prompted the creation of this whole myth of Christianity, which is a bigger story, but it is a myth. It's absolutely a myth. It was the first Gospel of Mark that was written to essentially co-opt Judaism, and that in any case, the Colosseum was to be a public spectacle on the destruction of any zealot who would oppose or try to attempt to proselytize the overthrow of the Roman Empire, and overthrow being having the army worship a monotheistic God who is not of earth. And that so I come from this whole religion standpoint, from that historical perspective, Clay, and I have a very sanguine look at what is being prompted as the truth. I believe that the New Testament was written to specifically co-opt Judaism, or the Hebrews, and that we're at a point now, we're finalizing the point where the Protestant Reformation is destroyed. There is no breakaway faction of Christianity that would not be subservient to the Pontifex Maximus.
Let me stop you right there, because yeah, sure. My book, Mystery Babylon, I refer to that. Hand that to me, darling. I refer to it on the cover as the Israelite Handbook for True Christians. I say that the forces arrayed against us are the legions of Lucifer, although I may not totally agree with that right at this point. And the title on it is A New World Order Unveiled. It says, 2,000 years ago, the Bible told us of the coming of the New World Order as the eighth beast, the mark of the beast, warned us about the Jews who say they're Jews and are not. Jesus told us that they were liars and of their father Satan. In this book, the past meets the future, and this has got I put this together after the Homeland Security, which is pretty much Jewish ADL, Southern Poverty Law controlled. They point the finger at the veterans. They're pointing their fingers at the militia. Anybody, they of course they've always demonized us bikers, because we don't follow real well, and we question things. So we represent rebel groups now.